She looked at me like someone admitting a crime, eyes full of salt, from the sea and from tears, and whispered a sentence I never expected to hear from her of all people. "If no one comes, will you stay with me?" If anyone from the office had heard that question coming out of my boss's mouth, from the woman they called the Ice Queen behind her back, they would have laughed and said it was a bad joke. But there, on that strip of sand that didn't even exist on a map on my phone, with the waves licking our ankles and the sky bruised with the remains of a storm, nothing about it was funny. It was just me, my boss, and the terrifying possibility that the world might never find us. My name is Daniel. I'm the kind of guy you pass in a corridor and forget 5 minutes later. Slightly wrinkled shirt, old office shoes, tired eyes, backpack over one shoulder, always doing math in my head. Rent, mom's medication, credit card, late fees. I never planned to be the hero of anything. My plan was simple. Keep my head down, keep my job, make it to the end of the month. My boss, Claire, was the opposite of everything I was. Tall, sharp, always put together. Blazer perfectly cut, discreet jewelry, perfume that left a trail in the hallway. When she walked into a meeting room, conversation stopped. People straightened in their chairs. Someone would whisper, "She's here," like we'd just seen a storm forming over the ocean. Claire took over the company when her father got sick, they used to say in the break room. Tripled the revenue in 4 years. Never takes time off. Answers emails at 3 in the morning. Would fire her own cousin if she had to. By the time I finally saw her in person, I already knew the legend. It was a quarterly results meeting. I was at the far end of the table, trying to make myself invisible, when she stepped in, heels clicking, tablet in hand. No small talk, no nervous smile. Just a quick look at the slides, and then, one by one, at the faces. Her eyes stopped on me. "This red number here," she said, pointing at a corner of the chart, "belongs to your area, right?" My tongue went dry. "Yes, ma'am. I can explain." She raised a hand. "I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked for performance. Starting today, you send me a daily report. Directly to me. If you want to keep that badge on your chest, get comfortable working under pressure." Silence. 20 people pretending not to be grateful they weren't the ones under the spotlight. I felt my face burn. Anger rose in my chest, but fear sat on top of it and pushed it down. I just nodded. That night, I came home late, opened the door as quietly as I could, and found my mother in the armchair in the living room, nebulizer mask in one hand, the other rubbing her chest. "You worked late again," she said, pulling the mask away and forcing a smile. "They're lucky to have you." I looked at her and lied. "Just one stressful week, Mom. It'll get better." I didn't tell her that if I messed up again, I might not have a job next month. The routine became brutal. I arrived before the cleaning staff and left after security turned off half the lights. I replied to emails at 1 in the morning. I rewrote spreadsheets no one thanked me for. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, an email would pop up from her. "Check item 7. You can do better." I was angry at her. Truly. But there was another feeling I didn't want to admit. She saw me. She knew my name. She read my work. Even if it was to tear it apart, she was the first person in a long time who looked straight through the gray fog of just another employee and said, without saying, "I expect something from you." Being seen in a world that steps over you hurts in a different way. When the company announced its annual convention at a beach resort, I assumed I wouldn't be going. Those trips were for high-potential people, managers, directors, not for a quiet analyst from the back office. So when HR called me into a meeting and handed me an envelope, I thought they were about to fire me in a very fancy way. "Congratulations, Daniel," the HR coordinator said, smiling. "You've been selected as one of the highlights of the year. Ms. Claire personally asked to include you." I stared at my own name printed beside the words "Convention, Award Trip," as if it belonged to someone else. That night, I walked into our tiny apartment holding the envelope like a trophy. "Mom," I said, dropping onto the sofa. "They're sending me to a resort by the ocean. 3 days. All paid." Her eyes shone. "I told you," she said, squeezing my fingers. "You're better than you think. Go. Breathe a little. You barely have a life outside of that office." If I had known what awaited me by the sea, maybe I would have torn that envelope in half. Or maybe not. Some storms come whether you're ready or not. The first day at the resort looked like a corporate brochure. Blue pools, palm trees, polished smiles. People took selfies with their badges hanging from their necks, pretending to be relaxed while still talking about KPIs and quarterly targets over tropical drinks. Claire arrived in a black car, sunglasses on, face unreadable. She went straight from the car to the conference room as if the palm trees and the ocean didn't exist. On stage, with a microphone in hand, she talked about growth, resilience, the future. Her voice was steady, her posture perfect. She looked like someone who belonged everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But at one point, while the lights dimmed for a video and her face was caught in profile by the blue of the projector, I saw something I had never noticed in any meeting. Exhaustion. Like someone who'd been carrying the world on their shoulders for too long and didn't know how to put it down. The second day was the fun part, a boat tour around nearby islands. In the morning, the wind was already stronger than I liked. The sky wasn't fully blue. There was a gray line on the horizon that my father would have frowned at. My father was a fisherman. He used to read clouds the way I read spreadsheets. Storm, he would say, with a glance. Not today. But the captain of our boat smiled with all his teeth and said, "No problem, just choppy water." The schedule was tight, the company had already paid, and no one wanted to be the one to cancel the experience. When I stepped onto the boat, something inside me tightened. The sea was darker than the postcards, a heavy indigo full of unsaid things. The wind slashed at my cheeks. Claire came on board last, having traded her blazer for a white button-up and flat shoes. Even casually dressed, she looked like she was about to negotiate a merger. She walked past me just as the boat rocked hard. For a second, she lost balance and reached out, her hand grabbing my forearm with surprising force. Our eyes met. For the first time, I saw a real surprise on her face. Not the controlled eyebrow lift from meetings, but a human. I almost fell. "Sorry," she muttered, letting go quickly. "Don't worry," I replied. The boat pulled away from the dock, slicing through the first waves. People laughed, made jokes, took pictures. Someone turned the music up. I stood at the back, staring at the white trail left behind, thinking how easy it is for everything we know to shrink into a thin line vanishing in the distance. Half an hour later, the sky changed its mind. The wind grew teeth. The sea went from restless to angry. Clouds piled on top of each other like mountains. The first drops of rain were heavy enough to sting. The captain shouted commands I couldn't hear over the sound of the engine and the water slamming against the hull. "Is this normal?" someone yelled, trying to keep their balance. I'm not a sailor, but I remembered my father's voice in my head. The sea doesn't always warn twice. I looked toward the horizon and saw something I'll never forget. A wall. A dark, solid wall of water and wind swallowing the blue. Then everything happened at once. A wave slammed into the side of the boat so hard that the world tilted. People fell, glasses smashed, someone screamed. Metal groaned. Another wave crashed over us, drenching everyone. Rain turned into a curtain. The sky disappeared. "Life jackets! Get inside," someone shouted. I tried to move toward the cabin, but the floor wouldn't stay still. My hand slid on the wet deck. All I could hear were shouts, prayer fragments, and the monstrous roar of the sea. Then I heard her voice cut through the chaos. "Her jacket! Where's her jacket?" I turned toward the sound. One of the accountants lay sprawled on the floor, knocked out cold, head bleeding after hitting a bench. Claire was on her knees, hair plastered to her face, trying to buckle a life vest around the limp body. "Hold her!" Claire shouted at me. I fell to my knees beside them, my fingers fumbling to keep the woman still as the boat lurched violently. Another wave hit. Something cracked. "We're going to capsize," someone cried. The captain yelled something about turning back, but the boat was no longer in charge. The last thing I remember before everything disappeared was the sound of ripping metal and a flash of white that wasn't light, it was water. Everywhere. Above, below, inside my lungs. When the ocean swallows you, there is no drama music, no slow motion. There is only silence and weight. My father's words came back. "If you ever fall in, don't fight the sea. Let it show you which way is up." So I stopped, just for a second. And in that second, my hand brushed against something floating. A plank, a piece of the boat, I don't know. I grabbed it with all the strength left in me, kicked clumsily, and trusted that some instinct older than fear would push me toward air. My head broke the surface with a violent gasp. I choked, coughed, swallowed more water. The sky was gone in a blur of gray and white. The boat wasn't a boat anymore. It was debris, people shouting, others not moving at all. "Claire!" I screamed, without thinking. I spun around, blinded by rain and spray, heart pounding. Then I saw her. She was clinging to a broken piece of railing several meters away, eyes wide with terror. Not boss terror, not "we missed a deadline" terror, but pure animal panic. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I started swimming toward her, or trying to. Each wave shoved me sideways, backward. My muscles screamed. Cold bit into my bones. At one point, I lost the plank I was holding. For a second, I thought, this is it. Then I saw her fingers slipping from the metal. "Hold on," I yelled, though my voice was nothing against the storm. When I finally reached her, her face was pale, teeth chattering. Her hand shot out and gripped my wrist like a vice. I can't swim," she gasped, choking on seawater. The woman who ran a whole company couldn't swim. I don't know why that detail struck me so deeply, but it did. "Then you're going to have to trust me," I said, though I wasn't sure I trusted myself. Her life jacket had been half-clipped. I adjusted it as best I could in the chaos, tightening the straps around her, pushing her chest up toward the surface. Then I hooked my arm around the same piece of railing, letting the sea toss us wherever it wanted. There was no heroism there, just survival. I don't know how long we were at the mercy of the waves. Time dissolves when all you have is one job: stay alive for one more breath. At some point, the roar of the storm faded into a distant rumble. Then I felt sand scraping my knees. When I opened my eyes, I was face down on wet shore, coughing and retching until my chest hurt. My whole body throbbed, as if I'd been thrown down a flight of stairs. The first thing I saw was the sky, heavy and low, but no longer trying to kill us. Then I turned my head and saw a line of palm trees, a wall of green, and her. Claire was lying a few meters away, on her back, hair tangled with seaweed and sand, chest rising and falling unevenly. "Claire!" My voice came out as a croak. I crawled toward her, every movement sending a sharp pain through my right leg. When I got close enough, I shook her shoulder. "Claire! Hey, wake up!" Her eyes snapped open, like someone waking from a horrible dream. She gasped, grabbed at her neck for the necklace she always wore to the office. It was gone. Realization flashed through her face as she took in the sea, the ripped life jacket, the wreckage scattered along the waterline. And then she saw me. "Where are we?" she whispered. "I think we're—" I swallowed hard. "Not on the boat anymore. That's for sure." She tried to sit up, but her muscles betrayed her. "Is anyone else here?" I forced myself to look around. The waves rolled in, dragged bits of wood away, brought other things back. A cooler, a plastic crate, life jackets, shoes, people. I don't see anyone moving," I said quietly. For a moment, the Iron Lady of our company looked like a little girl who'd just lost sight of her parents at a crowded fair. Her eyes shone, but she blinked the tears away with the same discipline with which she answered emails. "Then priority one," she said, voice rough but still strangely controlled, "is not dying here too." I wanted to yell that this wasn't a project with bullet points, that this was a nightmare. But when I tried to stand, a bolt of agony shot up my leg. I looked down. A deep gash ran along the side of my thigh, packed with sand and blood. "Damn," I muttered. "You're bleeding a lot," she said. "Really?" Hadn't noticed. I shot back, more out of shock than sarcasm. She scanned the beach, eyes darting. Then, without a word, she tore a strip from her shredded shirt and crawled over to my side. Her hands shook as she wrapped the fabric around my leg, tightening it into a tourniquet. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "It already hurts." She pulled. White stars exploded in my vision. I bit down on my lip so hard I tasted blood. "It's better you scream now," she murmured. "Then pass out later and never wake up." When she finished, she sat back and took a breath. Her own knees were scraped, her ankle already swelling. She ignored it. "Can you stand?" "I'll try. But maybe we should look for survivors first." She closed her eyes for a moment. I saw the war happening behind her forehead. CEO instinct wanting to move, human instinct wanting to collapse. "We will," she said. "But if anyone's alive, they'll need someone on their feet. So, let's start with that." With her shoulder under my arm and a palm tree trunk under my hand, I managed to get upright. We limped along the beach, calling out names, searching behind rocks and pieces of hull. Every time we saw something colorful floating, our hearts jumped and then sank again. We found no one breathing. There are scenes your mind refuses to keep in full color. It turns them sepia or blurs the edges, just so you can go on. All I will say is, we were not the only ones who reached that shore. We were the only ones who stood up on it. At some point, Claire stopped, feet half buried in the wet sand, shoulders rigid. Her lips moved around words that didn't quite leave her mouth. They were my responsibility, she whispered eventually. I approved this trip. I signed off on the budget. I looked at the weather report and said we could manage. I had spent months wanting to see a crack in her armor. Now that it was there, all I wanted was to help her hold it together. You didn't summon the storm, I said. I chose to risk it, she replied, eyes burning. Because in my head, everything can be managed if you plan hard enough. She turned her back on the ocean, jaw clenched. Right now, planning means fresh water and shelter. If this is an island, someone must know it exists. They'll look for us. And if they don't, they will, she said firmly. We were on a company trip, on a registered route. Search teams will go out. Planes. Helicopters. Fine, I sighed. Then let's try not to die before they get here. We pushed into the trees, my leg throbbing, her ankle buckling every few steps. The ground was uneven, full of roots and leaves and unseen things that scuttled away when we approached. The air smelled of damp soil and sap. After what felt like an hour, we heard it, the sound of water trickling. A narrow stream cut through the greenery, clear and cold. Thank God, I breathed. She knelt, splashed water on her face, drank in small gulps, then looked up at me. Drink slowly, she instructed. Too much at once will make you sick. I wanted to snap that she didn't have to manage my hydration. But the truth was, I was grateful. Even her bossiness, twisted in this new context, was a kind of care. We spent the rest of that first day in survival mode. We dragged larger pieces of wood and any scraps we could use back toward the edge of the forest. Leaning them against a cluster of rocks, we made a crooked shelter. It wouldn't win any design awards, but it kept the worst of the wind off us. When the sun finally sagged into the water, the sky turned shades of orange and purple I'd never stopped to notice in the city. My body hurt in places I didn't know I had. Claire crouched near a small fire she'd insisted we build, using dried leaves and twigs she'd forced to spark with a lighter she'd found in someone's fallen bag. Her face glowed in the firelight, softer than in the sterile light of the office. But her eyes were somewhere else. If they started the search right after the distress signal, they could be flying over here tomorrow, she said, as if reading her thoughts out loud. We have to stay visible on the beach during the day. And if nobody picked up the signal? She shot me a look. Not angry. Scared. Daniel, she said quietly. If we let our minds sit in the worst version of this, we won't make it through the night. She tossed another stick into the flames. Sparks rose, then disappeared. I know you hate me, she added suddenly. The statement was so blunt it almost made me forget where we were. What? In the office, she said. I know you hate me. I recognize the way you look at me when I correct you in a meeting. I've seen that look plenty of times. There was a time when I would have denied it on instinct. But on a nameless beach with your boss's hair still tangled with salt, politeness loses its power. I don't know if it's hate, I said, after a moment. Maybe it's fear. And resentment. Because I always feel like, in your eyes, I'm never enough. Like you want me to be perfect the way you are. She blinked, genuinely taken aback. Is that what I look like to you? Yeah. She stared into the fire for a long time before speaking again. When I was in business school, she said slowly, one of my professors told me, if you want to be taken seriously as a woman in this field, you don't get to be wrong. If you mess up, it's not Claire who messed up. It's the woman who couldn't handle it. She let out a humorless breath. I swallowed that whole. I decided that if I was ever going to sit in my father's chair, I'd have to be twice as sharp, twice as cold. I thought that was the only way to protect what he built, and to protect myself. She pressed her hands together, knuckles white. But today I made a decision that cost lives. There's no spreadsheet that erases that. Guilt poured off her like another wave. We both know you didn't control the storm, I said quietly. I ignored the warning signs, she replied. Because controlling things is the only language I know. I could have said, it's not your fault. But it would have been a lie. Fault was spread across decisions, reports, pressures, and yet, in her chest, It had found a single address. Maybe the real question isn't what everyone will say about you when you get back, I said instead. Maybe it's who you'll decide to become after this. What you'll do with the guilt if you survive. Her gaze met mine, searching. For a second, it felt strange that I, the invisible analyst, was saying this to her. The woman whose calendar was always full. How do you deal with yours? She asked. My turn. I took a breath, tasting salt and smoke. My father died at sea, I said. He went out on a day when the sky looked a lot like it did this morning. I asked him not to go. He laughed, said he knew the ocean better than anyone, that everything would be fine. I looked at the black water beyond the firelight. He didn't come back. I was 17. I spent months thinking. If I had insisted harder, if I had hidden his keys, if I had done anything else, maybe he'd still be here. Logically, I know it's not true, but try telling that to a teenager watching his mother fall apart. Claire listened in silence. No advice. No interruptions. So yeah, I went on. I carry my own storm around. It's quieter now, but it's still there. I'm sorry, she said softly. And she meant it. We let silence sit with us. Not the empty kind, but the heavy kind that holds stories in it. Above us, 1,000 stars appeared, bright and indifferent. Do you realize, she said at last, lying back in the sand to look at the sky, that this is the first day in years I've gone without checking my phone? A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. The roaming charges would be terrible here, I replied. She chuckled. I don't have a calendar tonight, she added. No meetings, no flights, no back-to-back calls. Just the fact that we're still breathing on a piece of land nobody knows we're on. That's one way to put it, I said. She turned her head toward me. The firelight softened her features. How do you see me, Daniel? She asked suddenly. No titles, no filters. I want the truth. I hesitated. It was like touching a bruise. You know it will hurt, but sometimes you need to know how deep it goes. I see a brilliant, stubborn, insanely capable woman, I said slowly. But I also see someone who scares people, because you give the impression that you never crack, that you don't doubt, you don't get tired, you don't feel. And when we mess up, it feels like, for you, we're just numbers on a chart. Her eyes flickered. And now, I said, I see a person who almost died beside me. That changes things. She let out a breath that wasn't quite a sigh, wasn't quite a laugh. My father was harsh, she confessed. With me, with his staff, with the world. But he built everything by hand. I grew up trying to prove I deserved what he created, that I wasn't just the boss's daughter. The day I took his place, one of our senior directors pulled me aside and said, I'll be watching. One mistake, and I'll take everything your father gave you. She looked back at the fire. I should have reported him. Instead, I made a silent promise. I would never give him the satisfaction of seeing me fail. Somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing the people in the building as people. They became moving parts in a machine I was desperately trying to keep from falling apart. She swallowed hard. Do you think someone like that can change? I thought of my father's boat, of my mother's hands shaking while she signed documents she didn't understand because she needed the pension to live. I think the storm doesn't care who we are, I said. But what we do after it passes, that's on us. Claire lay there for a while, eyes open, looking up at the sky as if she were seeing it for the first time. If we get out, she murmured, there are things I want to do differently. Like what? For starters, I want to know the names of my employees' parents, she said with a sad little smile. It sounds silly, but if I had remembered, really remembered, that behind each badge there was someone waiting at home, maybe I would have listened more, pushed less. We fell asleep in fits and starts, waking up at every strange sound. A branch snapping, a wave louder than the last, some animal calling from the trees. Between the fear of never being found and the fear of being found too late, the night stretched painfully long. The second day on the island was raw. There were no more illusions that this would be over quickly. My cut throbbed more. Her ankle was swollen and purple, though she tried not to limp. We spent the morning strengthening our SOS sign on the sand with bigger logs and rocks. From above, it would be clear, we told ourselves. Someone would see it. They had to. By midday, the sun was merciless. We sat in the thin shade of our makeshift shelter, sweat mixing with dried salt on our skin. Claire took off the remains of her ruined shirt, down to a simple tank top. For the first time, she didn't look like a magazine version of herself. She just looked human. You know what's crazy? She said, burying her toes in the hot sand. If someone from the office walked past us right now, they probably wouldn't recognize me. No blazer, no heels, no makeup, no power. Or maybe, I replied, they'd actually see you for the first time. She tilted her head. What do you mean? I think we all hide behind something, I said. You hide behind Claire the CEO. I hide behind Daniel the guy who never complains. And then we walk past each other thinking we know who we're looking at. She considered that. So who is Daniel really? The question caught me off guard. I like to draw, I admitted, embarrassed. Her eyebrows rose. Draw? Yeah. As a kid, I used to sketch boats, streets, people I saw on the bus. I still draw sometimes, on my breaks. I have a battered sketchbook in my locker. I've never seen anything, she said. I don't show anyone. I shrugged. It doesn't pay bills. And I'm afraid people will think it's childish. She shook her head slowly. You've spent months sending me pristine reports, but you hide the thing that actually lights you up because you're afraid someone will laugh. Spreadsheets no one compliments. At least no one laughs at them. I smiled weakly. She was quiet for a moment. And you? I asked. What's the thing you love that no one knows about? She hesitated. I like to sing, she said. I blinked. Sing? Yes. Not on stage. God, no. When I was younger, my mom used to say I had a good voice. My father hated unproductive hobbies, so I sang in secret. In my car, in the shower. Over the years, with the company, the meetings, I stopped. There was always something more urgent. Why did you stop? Her gaze wandered out to the water. Because life got loud on the outside, she said. And I started believing my own silence was professionalism. We sat there a while, two adults confessing abandoned dreams on a deserted island. Daniel, she asked eventually, are you afraid of dying here? I could have dodged the question, could have made another joke. But after everything we'd already said, that would have been cowardly. I am, I said. Not of death exactly. I'm afraid of dying having never really lived as myself. Of going out as the guy who only ever worried about paying bills and making sure he didn't disappoint his boss. And who would you be if you were free of that? Someone who draws more, I answered honestly. Who says no sometimes. Who goes home earlier to have coffee with his mom. Someone who isn't always apologizing for existing. She nodded slowly. I'm afraid of dying here, she admitted. Because if I do, the world's summary of me will be. She was a brilliant CEO. Tough. Efficient. Ruthless. And I don't know if I want that to be the final line. Her words hung between us like a verdict. Then maybe this isn't the end, I said. Maybe this is the part in the story where the character realizes they don't want the ending that was written for them. Later that day, as the sky blushed with evening again, we sat side by side facing the horizon. No helicopters. No boats. Only the endless breathing of the sea, in and out. That was when she asked the question that started this whole story. We were quiet. She had her arms wrapped around her knees, chin resting on them. The wind played with her hair. I was absent-mindedly tracing shapes in the sand with a stick, fighting off 1,000 anxious thoughts. Daniel, she said quietly. Yeah. What if no one comes? I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice. What if no one comes? She whispered, the words heavier now. Will you stay with me? My head snapped toward her. It wasn't a flirtatious line. It wasn't a movie moment. It was raw, transparent. It came from the place where all her masks had burned away in that sea. She wasn't asking if I'd date her or marry her. She was asking, if the world forgets us, will I still matter to someone? Am I worth staying for when I have nothing to offer? I swallowed. I don't have anywhere else to go. I tried to joke. She didn't smile. I'm serious, she insisted. I've spent my whole life telling people what to do, pushing them away when they got too close. I have never asked anyone to stay. Not my ex-husband. Not my friends. Not my team. But right now I don't want to go through this alone. The wind carried the sound of the waves and the crackle of the dying fire. Claire, I said, looking straight at her, if no one comes, I'll stay with you. Until the last sunset. Her eyes filled. One tear carved a clean path through the salt and dirt on her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. I don't deserve that kind of loyalty, she murmured. Out here, nobody's earning anything. I replied softly. You're not my CEO. You're just a person. And so am I. That night, she sang. We lay on our backs in the cool sand, staring at the sky ablaze with stars, when her voice floated into the dark. shaky at first, then more sure. A lullaby her mother used to sing to her. The melody was simple and old, the kind that feels like it has always existed. Her voice wasn't technically perfect. It didn't need to be. There was warmth in it, vulnerability, an ache I recognized even without understanding the exact story behind it. "Don't stop," I whispered when she fell silent. "I'm embarrassed," she chuckled, a little breathless. "Look around," I said. "Our audience is a bunch of trees and some confused crabs. Sing." She took a breath and began again. And for the first time since the boat went under, my heart stopped racing. For a few minutes, it was just her voice, the stars, and me. There was no rescue on day 3. Or day 4. Time started to melt together. We marked the passing days not with calendars or emails, but with how empty our stomachs felt and how deep the shadows of the palm trees got at different hours. We fell into a strange rhythm. Mornings on the beach, checking the sky, reinforcing our signal. Afternoons refilling containers with stream water, gathering coconuts, looking for anything edible that didn't look like it would kill us on the spot. Nights by the fire, trading stories. I told her about the teacher who'd stopped me from dropping out of school to work full-time at a workshop. "You are not the sum of your overdue bills," she'd said. I told her about the day my mom got her diagnosis, and how I'd sat in the hospital bathroom pretending to scroll my phone so she wouldn't see me cry. She told me about the promotion that cost her a marriage. How her ex eventually said, "I'm tired of being husband number 2 after your company." How she had gone back to work the next day and closed a deal like nothing had happened. "I made the company my shield," she said. "If I focused on the profits, on the charts, I didn't have to look at how empty my life was outside that building." "Sometimes we drown ourselves in work, so we don't have to hear how loud the silence is at home," I replied. She looked at me, genuinely startled that I understood. On what I think was the 5th day, my body gave up pretending it was fine. The cut on my leg had grown angry and hot. By afternoon, I was shivering under a burning sun. Claire was the one who noticed. "You're burning up," she said, pressing her palm to my forehead. "Guess I finally have something in common with your quarterly targets," I muttered. "I'm through the roof." She didn't laugh. "This is not good." Her voice was tight. "If that wound is infected—" "I know," I interrupted. She spent hours going back and forth between the stream and our shelter, soaking cloths and laying them across my forehead, my neck, my chest. She kept talking about anything to keep me awake. Gossip from the office, weird habits of people I barely knew, stories from her childhood. "Don't fall asleep," she pleaded whenever my eyes drifted shut. "Stay with me, Daniel. At least buy me dinner first." I tried to joke, teeth chattering. "If you die on my watch after everything we went through, I swear." Her voice broke. "You'll fire me?" I whispered. She shook her head, furious at the tears forming in her eyes. "I'll never forgive myself," she said. "Claire," I said, forcing my eyes open, "you are not that powerful. You didn't control the storm. You don't control this." I gestured weakly at my body. "I brought you on that boat. You also put my name on that envelope," I reminded her. "If we're going to keep score, you're tied." She grabbed my hand and held it tight, as if physical contact alone could anchor me to that island. "Please," she whispered, forehead almost touching mine. "Don't leave me here alone." Those weren't the words of a CEO. Those were the words of a human being who had hit the bottom of herself. I don't remember everything that happened that night. There were waves of fever, fragments of nightmares where the boat went down again and again. But I do remember 2 things clearly: the feel of Claire's hand wrapped around mine the whole time, and the sound of her voice, hoarse from singing the same lullaby over and over. Somewhere between her melody and her stubbornness, the fever broke. The next morning, when I opened my eyes properly, the light wasn't stabbing into my skull as badly. My body still ached, but the fire had cooled. Claire was asleep sitting up, head resting awkwardly against my arm. Hair a mess, face streaked with tear lines and ash. For the first time, I thought, she looks fragile. She startled awake and immediately reached for my forehead. "It's down," she exhaled, closing her eyes a moment in relief. "Thank God. You stayed all night?" "Of course I did," she said, as if there had never been another option. "The Ice Queen," I said, weak but amused, "turns out to be a secret nurse." "Say that again at the office and you're out," she replied, but her mouth curled into a tired smile. On what I'm almost sure was day 7, it happened. We were on the beach, as we always were at that hour, rewriting the edges of the big SOS in the sand, pushing sticks deeper, dragging rocks into place. The sun was high, the sky clear for once. Claire suddenly froze, her hand shading her eyes. "Daniel, look." I followed her gaze. In the distance, barely visible at first, a dark dot moved against the crisp blue. It could have been a bird, a trick of the light. For a few terrifying seconds, I didn't dare hope. Then the dot grew, and the faint whomp 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 reached our ears. "It's a helicopter," I breathed. "It's a helicopter," she repeated, as if she needed to hear it twice to believe it. We lost our minds. We screamed. We waved our arms. We jumped up and down like children. Claire sprinted to the fire pit, tossing in damp leaves to create a column of thick smoke. I grabbed anything reflective I could find and waved it at the sky. The helicopter drew closer, circled, lowered. When I saw someone leaning out of the side, pointing at us, I fell to my knees and laughed and sobbed at the same time. Next to me, Claire dropped her face into her hands and cried like she hadn't allowed herself to cry in years. They hauled us up, strapped us in, put headphones over our ears. From above, the island looked small and almost peaceful, a green dot ringed with white. You could barely see the wreckage scattered along the beach. The rescuers spoke to us, asked questions, checked our vitals. I answered on autopilot. Because the truth was, my body was leaving that island, but part of my heart was still kneeling in the sand, hearing a woman in a torn shirt ask if I would stay if no one came. Back in the city, life tried to snap back into its usual shape. Hospital, tests, statements to the authorities, news reports, faces of those who hadn't come back staring at us from photographs on screens. They called it the Hartman incident, her last name. There were headlines about the CEO who survived and corporate tragedy at sea. People wanted her story, her tears, her message of resilience. For a while, she refused. She did something that didn't fit any narrative about her. She disappeared from the spotlight and sat in rooms with lawyers and families instead. She listened. She took the blame that was hers. She hired independent investigators. She stopped trying to spin. I went back to my tiny desk on the third floor, in a building that suddenly felt much too bright and too loud. People came by in little bursts. "How was it, man? Like a movie? You have to tell us everything." How did she react? Did she freak out? I smiled, said something vague about it was rough, and changed the subject. How could I explain to people who only knew Claire from performance reviews that I had seen her begging the universe not to leave her alone in the dark? A week after we were discharged, I got an email. "Please come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m., Claire." No assistant. No CC. Just her. I walked down the executive hall feeling oddly more nervous than I had the first time I met her. I knocked. "Come in." She was seated behind her desk, but everything felt slightly different. The blazer was gone. She wore a simple blouse, sleeves rolled up. There were still shadows under her eyes, but they didn't make her look weak. They made her look real. "Sit," she said. I sat. She took a breath. "First," she said, "thank you. For not leaving me in that water. For not leaving me on that beach. For keeping me awake when I wanted to shut down. I didn't really have a choice," I joked gently. "You're my ride to work." A corner of her mouth twitched. "I've set up an independent review of everything that led to the accident," she continued. "Routes, weather reports, vendor pressure, my own decisions. I've spoken to the families myself." I pictured her delivering bad news, not through press releases, but looking parents, spouses, children in the eye. "I told them the truth," she said. "Not the version that serves the company. The real one." She slid an envelope across the desk. "I've also decided something else." I opened it. Inside was a formal letter offering me a new position, head of human experience and culture, a department that hadn't existed until that moment. "I don't understand," I admitted. "I need someone here who won't let me forget what we lived through," she said simply. "Someone who knows what it's like to feel invisible, and who won't let other people go through their entire career like that. I want to change the way we push, how we set goals, how we support people. And I want you leading that work." I looked up at her, stunned. "I'm not a psychologist. I'm not HR. You're someone who holds other people's stories with respect," she replied. "That counts for more than an extra certification right now." I swallowed hard. "And if I mess it up? We'll learn from it," she said. "Together." And if you ever feel me slipping back into the old version of myself, I want you to come in here and say it to my face." I gave a strained laugh. "Are you sure about that?" "I am," she said. "On that island I asked if you'd stay if no one came. The truth is, people did come. A helicopter did. Medics did. Lawyers did. Journalists did. But I still need someone to stay. Not because I'm your boss. Because you know who I am without the title." My chest tightened. "And you?" I ventured. "Do you remember what you promised me that night when I was burning up?" She dropped her gaze briefly, then lifted it again. "I promised I'd try to be a better boss," she said. "A better woman. To stop hiding behind control." I remember every word. She reached for another folder and pulled out a few sheets of paper. My drawings. My stomach dropped. "How?" "I visited your mother," she said. "I owed her more than a phone call after almost bringing her son back in a coffin. We talked. She showed me a sketchbook. I asked if I could borrow some pages. My cheeks burned. "They're good, Daniel," she said. "Really. They're just sketches." She shook her head. "I want us to create something new here," she went on. "An internal space for people to show who they are beyond their roles. Artwork, poetry, music, whatever. I want your drawings to be the first on the walls." I stared at her, half wanting to hug her, half wanting to run away. "You're really changing," I said quietly. "I have to," she replied. "If I walked away from all of that and came back the same, then those days on that island would have been wasted. I won't let that happen." We stood. She came around the desk and held out her hand. "Can we start over?" she asked. "Not as CEO and subordinate. As two people who went through something no one else in this building understands." I looked at her hand. The last time I'd held it, there was seawater between us. Now there was an office carpet under our feet and fluorescent lights overhead. But the question was the same. "Will you stay?" I took her hand. "We can start over," I said. That night, when I got home, my mom was waiting in her armchair with that look that said she'd been sitting on a comet all afternoon. "So," she began, "the famous Ms. Hartman stopped by here in person." I sighed, smiling despite myself. "She did. You know what I noticed?" Mom continued. "Watching her on the news and then seeing her in my living room. The way she looks at you. Not like a boss looks at an employee. Like someone who knows you could have let go in that water, but didn't." "Mom, I'm not talking about romance," she cut in. "I'm talking about recognition. Some people walk through their storms alone and never meet a soul who truly sees them. Others," she nodded toward me, "have the strange luck of getting shipwrecked with exactly the person they needed to confront themselves." Her words stuck with me for a long time. The months that followed weren't neat. Investigations don't heal grief. New policies don't bring back the dead. Families still cried. Birthdays came and went with empty chairs at the table. But something real did change inside that building. Targets stopped sounding like threats and started sounding like challenges shared by a team, not orders handed down from a throne. Anonymous support channels were created. Workshops about mental health, about listening, about being human at work. The new department I led slowly went from pointless little initiative to place people went when everything was too heavy. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, when everyone else had gone home, Claire would show up at my door with a mug of coffee in her hand. "Remind me what I promised on that beach," she'd say. And I would. I'd remind her that she'd promised to look up from the numbers and see faces. To ask before assuming. To admit when she was scared, instead of burying herself in more work. Every now and then, I'd walk past the pantry and hear a familiar voice humming softly over the sound of the coffee machine. She still wouldn't sing in front of a crowd, but it was a start. And on my part, I didn't stop drawing. I drew even more. My sketches went up on the walls of our new human corner, alongside photos taken by the receptionist, poems written by one of the security guards, a watercolor by a programmer who'd never told anyone he painted. One day, I left a drawing on Claire's desk. Two tiny figures sitting side by side on a vast beach, the sky full of stars above them, the ocean stretching beyond. I didn't sign it. I didn't have to. When I passed by her office the next morning, it was framed on her shelf. A year after the accident, we went back to the coast. Not to relive the horror, but to honor it. The company organized a memorial on a different beach, near where the rescue teams had launched from. Families came. Colleagues. Rescue workers. Claire stood in front of a simple monument with the victims' names engraved on it and spoke. Not in jargon, not in polished PR. She talked about responsibility, about how her decisions had played a role. She apologized without excuses. She talked about how grief doesn't end when the headlines do. And then she said something that stuck with me. "I can't change what happened out there," she said, voice trembling slightly. "But I can decide who I will be because of it. And I refuse to let their memory be the beginning and end of a news cycle. The way we work, the way we lead, the way we look at each other in that building, that is their legacy now." When it was over, she walked to the water's edge, shoes in her hand, waves washing over her feet. I stood a few steps behind, giving her space. She didn't turn around when she spoke. "Daniel, if one day, despite everything, I start to slip back into who I was, if I start treating people like numbers again, will you still be there to pull me back?" I moved to stand next to her. The sea was calm that day, gently tugging at the shore. "Do you want to know if I'll stay?" I asked. She nodded. "Nobody deserves to go through another shipwreck alone," I said. "So yes, I'll stay." She closed her eyes, and one tear escaped, mixing with the sea spray on her cheeks. If you've listened this far, maybe you've never been stranded on a physical island after a storm. But I'm willing to bet you know a different kind of shipwreck. The job that vanished overnight. The relationship that broke without warning. The diagnosis that changed every plan. The betrayal you never thought would come. Sometimes, shipwreck isn't with splintering and waves roaring. It's a phone call in the middle of the afternoon. A sentence that starts with, "We need to talk." A doctor taking a deep breath before speaking. In that moment, everything you thought defined you, career, status, the role you played for others, goes under. And you wash up on a shore you didn't choose, with nothing but yourself and whoever happens to be beside you. What I learned, stuck on an island with my boss, is this. People are almost never exactly who we think they are. The coldest ones are often the ones who learned very early that softness was dangerous. The ones who seem strongest are sometimes the ones most terrified that, if they stop running, everything will collapse. I also learned that the world can forget you for a while. The emails stop. The calendar clears. The phone goes quiet. And yet, if even one person decides to sit in the sand with you, to hold your hand through the fever, to ask you if you'll stay when no one comes, you are not lost. Not completely. Today, when I leave the office earlier than I used to, carrying a cheap cake from the bakery to share with my mom, I remember the taste of sand in my mouth and whisper a quiet, "Thank you," for ordinary floors beneath my feet. When I see Claire laughing with the staff in the break room, hair down, shoes off, I hear her singing under that island sky. And when I notice someone glancing at her with that old mix of awe and fear, I think, if only you knew. If only you had heard her ask if anyone would stay. In the end, maybe the real question she asked on that beach isn't just hers. Maybe it belongs to all of us, in every relationship, in every storm. If no one comes, will you stay with me? Stay when the money runs out, when the title disappears, when the person you admired stumbles, fails, cries, when their story stops looking heroic and starts looking painfully human. If this story brushed against a place in you that's tired of pretending everything is fine, I want to ask you two things. In what islands have you already found yourself stranded? Who stayed with you when everyone else drifted away? And maybe an even harder question. For whom have you chosen to stay, even when it would have been easier to walk away? Do you believe in fate? Or do you think some storms come, as brutal as they are, to strip away what doesn't matter and show us who really does? If any part of this story spoke to your heart, share it with someone who's going through a silent shipwreck right now. Tell them they're not crazy for feeling lost. Write in the comments if you've ever felt abandoned on your own island, and who was the person who stayed beside you when no one else did. And if, at any point while you were listening, you felt understood, or less alone, or quietly challenged to be the one who stays, consider subscribing to the channel. Not for numbers, not for vanity, but because here, every story is a reminder that nobody should have to face their storms alone.